Hello, welcome to another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Sal. How about you?
Doing great.
Who you got for us?
Well, we got a returning guest on the line, the field marketing director of WinField United, Kyle Schonert. How you doing, Kyle?
Doing great, guys. How are you this morning?
Doing wonderful. But you know the drill that we got to start with the question of the day, and we got you an easy one. What is an underrated skill that everyone could benefit from? What's an underrated skill that everybody could benefit from?
I might say this is more of a practice than a skill, but we're going to roll with it.
So all right.
I'll use this example when talking with a new employee the other day. So you're aware Augie hired a new sales development manager out to cover the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
And he had us jump on and explain our roles and walk through what it is we do and how we'll interact with them. And while we were on, he wanted us to give them maybe a piece of advice that we had early in our career or wish that we would have had earlier in our career. And what stuck out to me was, and I think it's a lost art anymore, don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something. There's no foul in saying, hey, I don't know that, but I'll do my best to get you an answer. I remember my younger self in my retail days and first getting started, and there were plenty of questions that I didn't know the answer to. But I had an iPhone full of contacts with people with a lot more experience within me that I would be able to phone on and get them an answer and help build that knowledge base. That is one thing I think that a lot of people could probably benefit from. The way, how's the old saying go? You can't BS a BSer, I think is what I told her. So that's, I guess that would be my opinion of a skill someone new into this business or anybody in general could probably benefit from.
So when Jeff and I started in our careers, we didn't have an iPhone full of contacts.
No,
did
we had a black phone book.
Yeah.
If you were lucky,
you had a Rolodex. Though,
had a Rolodex,
and if you could really lucky in your territory, you could find those drive-up payphones.
Yes. Yeah, you knew where all the payphones was.
That's good, guy. You need to heed that advice if you're young and taking off. Don't fake it till you make it.
That's right.
Exactly right. I mean, I remember one of the first growers I met. His wife was my math teacher when I was growing up, and we went and had lunch at the local diner. And he was grilling me with questions left and right. And I was still pretty young, but I knew agronomy well. And I answered every one that I knew, but there are a few I didn't. I said, I don't know, but this man next to me knows it. So, and that just sticks out to me to this day.
Well, that's good. That's good. I think the I got two different skills. The first one would be public speaking. And we started this years ago. I was a 4-H leader. And when Indiana started the mini 4-H, you had the little kindergarten kids come in, they could join mini 4-H. And I remember some of those kids that they were so embarrassed to even get up and say their name. But, every meeting you had to do an introduction. We'd get them up and, if they could just get out of their seat and introduce themselves or maybe say what project they were taking. But as they went through, mini 4-H and then 10 years of 4-H, watching those kids get up and be able to speak in front of a group and stuff. So public speaking, I know my wife always made our kids enter public speaking in 4-H, and then they'd get, hardly anybody did it. So you always had a chance to go to the state, but they had to go give their speech up at the state contest and stuff. They hated it, but looking back now, it's a life skill that everybody needs. So public speaking would be my first one. And the second one, and I saw this yesterday, a list of just etiquette. And I wish I had that list with me, but it was just things that you need to do, especially when you're in sales and making sales calls and stuff, just proper etiquette and knowing how to act in public. So I think those are things that we take for granted that sometimes people miss that skill set.
Yeah. Just manners and courtesy.
Yes. Yeah, that
carries over to a lot of things.
Yes.
Gosh, I feel bad. I was going to say drywall or plumbing. So no, I tell you,
you're not wrong though. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But it's funny you said,
and mind your manners while you do it.
Right. But it's funny you talked about the iPhones, and I remember it's been about 20 years ago and phones and things were kind of coming around, and iPhones and one of my friends that's in my age range, he said, and he's in a leadership position in another co-op, he goes, technology will not leave me behind. And I think that for people in my age range is just commit to it and don't be one of those that thinks, well, I don't want to mess with that, right? that doesn't impress anybody. And we got Larry Huffmeyer, and he's if he can take a picture of it on his iPad, he'll take it. Right? I mean, he may struggle sending it, but he'll take it. But I think everybody just kind of embrace technology and don't try to fight it, because it's not going to get any less.
No. Now AI will do everything for us.
Well, we're going to talk about AIs, but a different type of AIs. We're going to talk about active ingredients and how those are affected going into next year. We're talking about herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. We used to call these pesticides, this whole category. But Kyle, tell us, the world is a smaller place anymore, and going into 2026, put a timestamp on this, and we are pretty much, let's just call it October of 25. Tariffs are a big topic right now, and those things can affect the cost of finished goods. So just kind of give us an overview of what the tariff landscape looks like right now.
Yeah, talking just a little bit of the trade war, tariff war amongst China, India, EU, UK.
I guess that's a good place to start. Is where does all of our stuff kind of come from as we use these herbicides, whether it's Roundup or Liberty, or we talk in terms of active ingredients. Where does most of the tech material how do we end up with these finished products? I mean, that the active ingredients come from somewhere.
Yeah, let's get right into it. What's the tariff environment that you kind of mentioned there a little bit, and how that affects the CP imports that we bring in? And I'd say it's safe to say, start the conversation where roughly 90% of the U.S. CP imports that we use, whether it's, to your point, glyphosate with Roundup, Liberty, Zidua, coming from China, India, the EU, and the UK. I would say China and India are probably the leaders in that market space. EU and UK, there's a little bit of fungicides that we might bring in, and maybe some metallochlor. And I think L-glufosinate comes from Europe and the UK, but it's no secret. China and India are the leaders of the pack when it comes to this. So let's back up to 2018 in Trump's first term. So he placed, I think it was a 7.5% tariff on most tech, and a 25% tariff added to all finished goods coming out of China. Pretty broad brush when we're talking AIs, but it pretty well encompasses all of them, and that's roughly the average rate. Those have pretty well been settled and priced into the market for roughly the last 7 years now.
They still exist. They still existed. They never went away.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, those did not fall off. Those are still in place today. I believe last time I was on here, we started talking about tariffs, but it was still kind of in its infancy, to where we are fully at it now. You look at January of 2025 and the tariffs imposed in this term. The ones that they brought out then, I think they were called the fentanyl tariffs, if I'm not mistaken. It might just be the nomenclature they were using behind them. Started out at 10%, then he doubled down on them in March, bumping them up to 20%. And that encompasses everything. So all of your big actives coming out of China, whether that's glyphosate, glufosinate, if it comes out of China, it had that 20% tariff on top of it. So that number sounds alarming. Take a cost of goods and add 20% to it. Think, whoa, what if you're from a grower's perspective, you might think a $40 gallon of Roundup and you throw 20% on it. That's a lot. Well, it might work out to about $1 to $1.25 on a gallon of glufosinate or glyphosate, and maybe 75 to 80 cents on a gallon of atrazine.
It's different than what I would have thought.
Yeah, sounds
when you
worse
think about it from a raw tech, it sounds a lot worse than what it is. That said, then you had the reciprocal tariffs that came on in April, and those are the ones. I'll share a slide a little bit later, but those are the ones that have fluctuated immensely. China went up to, I think it was 150 or 145% at one point, and then it dropped back down. You look at India today; they're sitting around 50%, where China's sitting at around 10% today. These are based off of trade agreements that the Trump administration is coming up with. And India and China have just been hit the hardest. I mean, he made that pretty clear when he took over in this presidential term, that he was gonna make them pay to do business with us. The tariff rates are just a little bit less coming out of the EU and the UK, but they're not shielded from it either. So all these expenses just add up at the end of the day, whether it's whether it's energy that we're importing or it might be something that makes a jug. I think there's so many pieces of the pie that people don't know goes into that crop protection market at the end of the day. They just see when they pull into your shed and they have chemical flowing into their sprayer, or your salesmen are dropping it off in a pickup truck. That piece of plastic may have imported in China. So everything that touches to that point is getting those tariffs on it.
I never thought about
a
even the
snowball effect.
package. Even the packaging could be affected.
Yeah,
It's not just the raw ingredients in the tech, but it could essentially be everything from start to finish in manufacturing the product.
Wow.
So, and not to get ahead of you, maybe you're going to cover this. Are you starting to see manufacturing come back to the U.S. where we could start, manufacturing some of these products here to get away from the tariffs?
Maybe. So we at Omnium, or we at WinField, we have our Omnium. We spoke to it last time that I was on the call. We have our own production capabilities, but for the most part, we're still importing that tech from whether it's China or India. So there are ways around it a little bit. Again, we're very fortunate with our domestic production capabilities, because we'll cover it a little bit later, I'm sure. And Sal, I know you and I have had a conversation on this, but we have the exempt list and the non-exempt list on different active ingredients. And one thing that is not on the non-exempt list was any formulated goods coming out of China. So if you see something that was produced start to finish in China, it is going to incur that full rate, where we might be able to buy tech for that product from India and bring it here and formulate it. If you're catching my drift there. So,
and that would be the reason why it doesn't add that much per gallon, right?
Correct.
Very good. All right. Okay. Back to you, Kyle. We kind of jumped in there. You were.
Yeah. And one more thing. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I saw the speaker had a list up, and I think he said there's 19 active ingredients coming off patent by the year 2028. How does that all also play into this tariff thing?
I guess the one I'll call out that's coming off patent, that's the big buzz right now, is pyroxasulfone. That's really going to be the one that's going to change the marketplace.
And that's one that he highlighted also.
Yeah, that's really the one that's going to be a game changer for our industry moving forward. Think of Zidua, think of Anthems of the world. Right now, I don't think those products seem to be adjusted as much. I mean, I believe Anthem is actually going to be coming down in price a little bit, so it might make it a little bit more cost effective as those do come off patent. But again, it's going to come back to where that tech's imported from. Kumei is the one who makes that. I'm not sure where they're situated globally. I would assume India or China. So if that's where that tech's coming from, it's not going to get a free pass per se when it comes to importing it into the States.
Very good. All right, but I know one thing when you started, Kyle, you said 90%, basically 90% of what we use comes from somewhere else of the active ingredients. So
from a raw tech standpoint.
That's
correct. We just, the Clean Air Act and everything else we have, it's a little bit tougher for us to produce these raw AIs that we need to formulate the products that we're using at the end.
What, China's not worried about their environment?
I don't believe so, from what I've gathered.
Yeah, they don't use DEF in their their diesel trucks over there.
And you got to think cost of labor too, right? I mean, that comes into play. It's probably a little bit more expensive for us. If we have shut those plants down, we're not going to go out and build one. And I would say if BASF or whomever decided to build a new tech plant today, I'd hate to think of the hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in infrastructure that would cost. Oh, and then guess what? You have to staff it at that point to produce these products. So China, a lot cheaper labor and a lot more abundant workforce to make a lot of these products for us.
Yeah, that definitely adds a wrinkle to the mix.
Yeah. Well, going when we talk about pricing, always hand in hand is supply. I mean, you mentioned 2018 and I forget the big shortage year where we're on allocations with Roundup and things like that. What's the supply if pricing won't be largely impacted by the tariffs? I mean, what's the supply going to look like for this coming year?
I think there's a couple things that come into play when you talk about that. I know last time that I was on here, we talked a lot about planning and having a plan with your growers, and then therefore you guys need to have that plan with us from distribution or the basic manufacturers. Right now, supply for the most part, aside from a few AIs, is pretty abundant. Glyphosate's going up a little bit in price because South America's got some demand there. Clethodom's gone down a little bit. But demand's likely to stay high with that. But where my concern is when you talk supply is if we're all sitting. So we talked about these tariffs. We talked about the implications that they could have to the business. And again, to a grower's perspective, it might add 30 cents to $1 an acre on cost if we have these tariffs. I'm not downplaying that by any means, especially in these economic times. We need to help our growers maximize their ROI as good as we ever had. But when you look at that cost from a manufacturing and a distribution standpoint, that can add millions of dollars in cost at the end of the day. So the risk of not planning to bring these products in, whether it's procuring or you at Premier Ag not going out and taking that order, is what could cause these supply chain issues, in my opinion. And I think that's what we saw the last few years where, well, I'm not going to buy because I think there's the potential for that product to go down. There's not a lot of upside risk. I'm just going to wait, maybe see if it goes down. That might be the case for some of these products, but a lot of these commodity type AIs, I don't think that's the case that we're living in today. I mean, they're all at historically low prices. I don't think there's a lot of downside risk. There might not be a lot of upside risk to those products either. The risk, though, is by not doing anything and waiting, and then everybody getting to spring and saying, I need my product and I need it tomorrow. And if your growers aren't buying, you're not buying from distribution, and it's not sending a signal to us that we need to be forecasting more. And then you just, we can't turn that spigot on and spit product out immediately like that. So that, in my opinion, is probably the biggest supply risk that we have. Tech's not going to be an issue to get. Us formulating and producing, it's not going to be an issue to get. It's just a matter of how much inventory somebody wants to sit on. And
yeah, you're not recreationally going to just produce an extra 100,000 gallons of something just in case they order it.
Correct. I mean, I remember when I was in retail, you could call 7 different distributors and they all had a mountain of inventory. I was having this conversation with a gentleman the other day. We're not selling any less. You guys aren't selling any less. Our competitors aren't selling any less. We're just managing our business a lot more efficiently. And to your point, Jeff, we're not sitting on that mountain of inventory that we used to. I mean, forecasting is as imperative as it's ever been. Just with cost to carry inventory and cost of goods, you can't take on that risk of bringing in a product and then that tariff does fall off, and you're sitting on product, and then you lose every bit of profit, or you lose every bit of money that you had invested into that just to offload it at that point. I'd say likely similar to the fertilizer market somewhat.
And I think that's been the biggest example we saw this past year, and some of the stuff where we've seen, chemicals in tight supply. We saw, especially UAN this last spring, got extremely tight. I think for the first time, I think we had customers that actually were worried if they were going to get the product they need. They especially if you look at UAN, I mean, you saw prices go up almost $200 a ton. It's a big difference if you would have forecasted that and booked it or prepaid it in December versus waiting until May to pull the trigger and buy that. It's just a huge shift in that market. And like I said, it's just sitting down with your salesperson and just having a crop planning session and going through. And it's like, you may not know exactly what your mix is. You may be 60% corn, 40% beans, or vice versa, but have that. Let's get a plan on paper and let's think about some options.
I think we almost have to start treating these commodity AIs like we do fertilizer. You know what it's going to cost to have that worked into your per acre basis. And let's face it, the clethodoms, the 2,4-Ds, the dicamas of the world, generic glyphosate, that's an overall small cost at the end of the day compared to a premium residual herbicide or a premium fungicide pass at that tassel time frame. If you know you're going to use these products, it's best to weigh that risk, get your quote, work that into your cost of goods, because they're the ones that tend to fluctuate more so than a Trivapro or a Reservoir Rev, something along the lines of that.
That's good advice.
It all goes back to planning, in my opinion.
And there's another monkey wrench here to be thrown in the mix is that, uh, growers, what they're planting is changing too. And we've had a major shift to Liberty glufosinate, from dicamba. So there's not really a good forecast based on history because those things can change. And if the grower's not taking it, that means we're not ordering it. That means distribution's not resupplying. And then it becomes kind of a similar scenario to the supply chain on the river and not refilling the river storage. So we have this whole thing get backed up.
It's true. That is true. A
I
little bit
would
of
say
planning
you,
goes a
you
long
mentioned
way.
glufosinate there. It's, that glufosinate is probably the best position we've had on it in recent time. Supply is pretty stable. Demand is pretty stable for the most part. To your point, we could see some demand on that finished good drop off if Bayer gets that over the top dicamba label approved. I would assume in the South that would shift a lot of gallons away from Liberty to where we might have excessive glufosinate to hit. But outside of government interdiction in China, I don't see this one moving much from the sounds of it. That AI is probably going to stay where it's at from a price standpoint, well into 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned a big one there with dicamba. That's not to get political again, but that's a big one that is on the horizon. And I know our procurement team's watching quite a bit. You have the over the top piece, but you also have a lot of the generics that come into the marketplace as well.
And and like I said, I don't live in this chemical world, but if I heard correctly, the dicamba label change is it going to go to a temperature instead of a date?
So they had that public comment period that closed a few weeks ago. I personally have not seen any more news released from that yet. I'm assuming I should hear something here shortly. I've got some calls later today I can ask that question on, but I've not seen any more regarding the Striax label and what their intentions are. Last I'd heard, I think that was one of them. But again, they opened that up for public comment, and I'm sure that will all change before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it is an AI, in my opinion, we need. I know it does come with some issues, but as we've talked in the past, the more AIs that we have at our disposal, the more that we can combat weed resistance, the more we need. It's just we need to make sure we're abiding by those labels when we're using them.
I think that's what I was talking to a guy in the forestry sector of the economy, and he was, we don't think about trees being an off-target, susceptible crop, but he was like, oh no. I mean, he was talking, he was a purchaser of logs and lumber, and I mean, he's done this for 35, 40 years, and he's like, I can tell, and I was like, ooh, but it's some cowboys that don't follow the labels, and that's what makes it bad for all of us.
That's exactly right. I mean, the label is the law, as Joe Rickard from our team would say, and he's right. And I think that's where we see, excuse me, I believe that's where we see a lot of our issues are those that aren't abiding by those labels. And whether you agree with them or not, it is the law, and they're the ones that can ruin it for everybody else.
All right. Kyle, you got anything else for us today? That was very informative and very helpful.
I'm pretty good on time if you got any more questions for me. So
you said you had a sheet that you wanted to share. What was
yeah, let's see if I can have to pull this up, share it, and minimize you guys real quick.
Everybody tries to minimize us.
I know. Gosh, it's so
I'll
sad.
just put you to the side over here. So this was one that they had sent us. It's just kind of a time frame of where those tariffs had come out. You can see, again, this is all non-inclusive of I think it was a 7.5% and then the 25% that he had thrown out there. Basically, when Trump had put his tariffs out, it's just a timeline showing the exempt ones, the non-exempt ones. Sal, I think you've got this. I'd be more than happy to share it with you again. But just a roller coaster of emotion. At one point, a lot of panic here, and this probably caused a little bit of a constraint on clethodim back this summer. India is a big clethodim supplier for us as well, but their production alone we can consume as WinField United. So that's the problem I guess I would get with a lot of these AIs is, yes, other states or other countries can produce them, but when you take a country like China out of the mix from a tariff standpoint and they produce 95%, these other countries, whether it's India, European, Poland is one we get some product from, they can't produce what China could. So that's where a lot of fear was instilled with this on, holy cow, how are we going to work this into the cost of goods? And essentially just got to where I think people stopped buying. Well, Trump playing hardball, dropped back off, leveled down here to 30%. So things have cooled off a little bit, but it was just some interesting times, and we were very concerned how supply was going to work out. It did. I mean, clethodim again was one that went up, but it's already gone back down. The tech price is not where it was a few years ago, but it's got this 30% tariff on it. So I don't think we're going to get back to those lows, but we're not going to be at the highs we were last year. And again, here's this non-exempt list we keep talking about, and I'll let you guys look through it real quick if you can see that. Okay, but there's a lot of product on there that we use every day to help these growers grow crops. So that's, again, these are the ones that are not exempt, so they will incur the full tariff rate and whatever it is at that time. 240.
That's a big list.
Dicamba, your metallitors over here, mesotrione. We're not seeing some of the fungicides on here, but it's a lot of herbicides and insecticides. And then this piece I spoke to earlier, the majority of formulated products. So again, we're able to buy, let's say 2,4-D, for instance. Let's say we found a supplier in Poland that we were able to import from, and there's no tariffs. Well, we can bring in that raw tech. We can bring it into our Omnium facility. We can formulate it, package it up, and ship it out to you. And it might not incur those tariffs if we're not buying it from a country that has it against it. Someone that's relying on China to produce their product for them, it's going to get, I would assume, the tariff on the 2,4-D itself, and then it being formulated product, it's going to get the full rate on that. Again, it's all about managing risk.
When you talk about imports and stuff, and just the logistics piece, and we talk about the importance of putting a plan together, what's the lead time? So if you're importing tech from Poland or China or something, so how long does it take to get shipped here? It's got to clear customs. It's got to get shipped across the country to your plant. What kind of lead time are you looking at?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. I'll go back to what I stated to open this call with. I'm not sure. I have to get you an answer on that one. That was supply chain was all the buzz there 3 years ago when COVID had happened. So I could easily probably go back and look at some notes, but to somewhat answer that question, I do know that there were ships that were waiting to port and were coming in, and these tariffs hit, and they turned around. They went back to their country of origin because the seller wasn't going to take that product in at that point. And then I think things kind of softened a little bit, and then they were able to get them turned back around and bring them in. But I'll get you a follow-up question for that. Maybe we can add that into the notes somewhere, because that is very interesting. And that was a lot of the risk, right, that was in play. Is I'm assuming our procurement team had product on order and waiting for it to hit, tariffs come out, and that product is worth or has 146 tariff stamped on it that you weren't planning into your cost of production at that point. So in all reality, you're going to reject it, I would say.
Yeah, I know. Like the fertilizer world, we look at, a lot of times if you're waiting on an import vessel, let's say you got 40 days of sailing time, it's going to come to NOLA. By the time you get that ship offloaded on barges and a couple of weeks of, river time just coming up the river system. I mean, it's kind of like you get to the middle of February. If you're waiting on a urea boat or a UAN boat, that thing needs to ship if you want to use it that spring. So I'm guessing the same thing goes with these chemicals, that you don't need everybody wait until April 1st to make a decision to import tech and make it.
And the other thing you have, Q4, we've got Q4 coming up, November, December timeframe. What do you think that they would rather haul? A TV or a boat full of TVs that they're going to be able to ship to Best Buy or whomever, or PlayStation 5s, whatever it is, and sell a consumer good versus this cheap, in their eyes, cheap tech that doesn't have the value that some of these other products do. So that's what spiked up freight rates up.
That's true. I never thought about that.
Getting into this business has blown my mind how big it really is.
Yeah.
And, when I started started in ag retail, and you go sell a guy a gallon of Roundup, you don't think anything about it. I
got a whole pallet.
Manager, he told me where to order it and where to bring it in from, just to know how big this business really is and where these products originate from, and how they make it from, factory to field. It's probably the best way to say that. Is just, it really is pretty mind-boggling at the end of the day.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good place to stop, I believe.
I think so.
All right, Kyle, thank you for joining us. We always appreciate your insight.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate the invite, Sal.
All right. Well, that's another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Thank you all very much.